My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 27 years old. My mother is Helen Bennett, and my aunt is Sharon Miller. I've spent most of my adult life trying to convince myself that the quiet disappointments I felt around them were just me being too sensitive. Sitting in my second-floor apartment in Chattanooga with the Tennessee River moving slowly past my window, I used to tell myself that family loyalty meant swallowing the small things. I was wrong. If you have ever sat with a knot in your stomach after a conversation with your own mother, wondering whether you were the problem for even noticing something felt off, I hope you will stay with me while I tell you what happened when the small things stopped being small. For years, the pattern was so ordinary, it almost disappeared into the background. My mother would call on Sunday evenings, her voice warm at first, then gradually heavier, with whatever weight she and my aunt were carrying that week. My aunt was almost always there in the background, chiming in with practical suggestions that somehow always circled back to how I could help. When I moved to Chattanooga for a junior marketing role that finally felt like it could grow into something steady, my mother cried on the phone for 20 minutes about how far away I was putting myself. My aunt told me gently that some opportunities were not worth the distance from family. I stayed anyway. I told myself their worry came from love. Money was never discussed directly, but it was always present in the silences. When I was finishing college, I asked once if there was anything left from my grandmother's small estate that could help with the last semester's tuition. My mother said everything had gone to medical bills and family needs years earlier. My aunt added that grandmother would have wanted the money used to keep the family stable, rather than one person's education. I took out more loans and worked extra shifts. Later, I learned my aunt had used part of that same money to expand her little gift shop. I did not learn it from them. The first real crack appeared on an ordinary Tuesday in early spring. I came home from a long day of client calls, kicked off my shoes by the door, and sorted through the mail on the little table under the window. One thick envelope stood out. The return address was a law firm in the town where my mother still lived. I did not recognize the name. Inside was a single-page notice about the final accounting and distribution of a revocable trust my grandmother had set up more than a decade earlier. My name was listed as one of the remainder beneficiaries. The numbers were modest, nothing life-changing, but they were real. There were dates showing transfers out of the trust, some of them years after I had been told there was nothing left. One line item referenced an account that matched the name of my aunt's business. I read the page 3 times before my hands started shaking. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, until I told her what I had found. "Olivia, that is ancient history," she said. And I could hear the shift in her tone, the way it tightened when she felt cornered. "Your grandmother's affairs were complicated. Your aunt handled the details because you were busy with school and then with moving. We did not want to burden you." My aunt's voice came through clearly on speakerphone a moment later. She must have been visiting. "Sweetheart, we protected you from the stress of it. You were always so sensitive about money. We thought it was kinder to let you focus on building your own life." I asked to see the full records. My mother sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. Why would you doubt us after everything we have done for you? After all the times we helped when you needed it, I had not asked them for money in more than 2 years. The last time I had mentioned struggling with rent, during a slow freelance month, my mother had reminded me that family helped family, and then changed the subject to how tight things were for my aunt's shop. I had sent what I could anyway. The call ended with my mother saying she needed to lie down, and my aunt telling me we would talk again when I was less emotional. I sat on the floor until the light changed outside the window and the river turned dark. Then I texted my friend Megan, who lived 2 buildings over and worked at the same marketing firm. She arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of cheap wine and the worried expression she got when she knew something was actually wrong. I showed her the letter. She read it slowly, then looked at me for a long time. "This is not nothing, Olivia," she said. "You told me years ago. They said there was no money left. You took loans you are still paying. And now there is paperwork with your name on it and transfers to your aunt's business." I wanted to defend them. The habit was so automatic, it rose before I could stop it. They had raised me. My mother had stayed up with me during fevers and driven me to every orthodontist appointment. My aunt had taught me how to drive and bought my first real winter coat when money was tight. Surely there was a reasonable explanation. Megan stayed until almost midnight. She did not push me to do anything that night. She just sat with me while I cried in a way I had not let myself cry in years. The kind of crying that comes from realizing the story you told yourself about your family was missing entire chapters. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a strange hollow clarity. I called the law firm listed on the letter. The receptionist transferred me to a paralegal who remembered the file. She was careful with her words, but she confirmed that the trust had been active longer than I had been told, and that my aunt had been listed as a co-trustee for several years. She also said she could not release full records without proper authorization or a formal request. I spent the rest of the day at my kitchen table with my laptop open, pulling old bank statements and emails I had saved, without really knowing why. Little things I had brushed aside started lining up. The time my mother had borrowed $300 from me for car repairs, that never seemed to happen. The Christmas my aunt gave my mother an expensive piece of jewelry while telling me the family was cutting back. The quiet conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. By evening, I felt sick with the weight of it. I made an appointment with a therapist whose name Megan had given me months earlier, when I had mentioned feeling constantly guilty about not doing enough for my mother. His name was Dr. Nathan Cole. The first available slot was in 2 weeks. I took it anyway. That night, I lay in bed listening to the river traffic and tried to picture what would happen if I simply asked my mother and my aunt, calmly and with the paperwork in front of me, to explain every transfer. The image that came instead was of my mother's face closing the way it always did when she felt accused, and my aunt stepping in with that soft, reasonable voice that made disagreement feel cruel. I did not sleep much. In the morning, I texted Megan again. "I think I need help figuring out what to do next," I wrote. She replied almost immediately. Whatever you decide, I am here. You do not have to do this alone. I wanted to believe her. I also knew that whatever came next would change the shape of my family forever, and that the version of me who had spent years swallowing the small things was already gone. The person left in her place was still shaking, but she was no longer willing to pretend she had imagined the knot in her stomach all along. The days after that first call blurred together in a way that still feels strange when I look back. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at colleagues in the small marketing office, where I'd finally started to feel like I belonged, and then came home to my apartment and sat by the window watching the river. Megan checked on me every evening, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes just sitting on the couch, while I tried to make sense of the letter that had upended everything I thought I knew. We started small. She helped me organize the few old family documents I had kept over the years. Old birthday cards, a couple of printed emails from when I first moved to Chattanooga, a notebook, where I had once written down questions I was too afraid to ask my mother directly. Nothing dramatic on its own. But when we laid them out on my kitchen table next to the trust notice, a pattern emerged that I had never let myself see clearly. Every time I had asked about money or support, the answer had been the same soft refusal, wrapped in guilt. Every time my aunt's shop had needed something, the family had found a way. On the Friday after the letter arrived, I had my first session with Dr. Nathan Cole. His office was in a quiet building near the river, not far from my apartment. He was younger than I expected, with a calm voice and the kind of patient attention that made it hard to keep deflecting. I told him about the letter, about the phone call, about the years of being told there was nothing left from my grandmother, while watching small improvements appear in my aunt's life and my mother's house. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he asked one question that stayed with me for days. What would it mean for you if the story you were told was not the whole truth? I cried in his office that first day. Not the angry kind of crying, but the exhausted kind that comes when someone finally gives you permission to stop defending the people who hurt you. He did not tell me what to do. He simply helped me see that the knot in my stomach had a name, and that name was not ungrateful daughter. My mother called again that weekend. This time my aunt was not on the line at first. My mother's voice was softer, almost pleading. Olivia, honey, I know you're upset, but dragging all of this up is only going to hurt everyone. Your aunt has been through so much with the shop. Can't we just let the past stay in the past? I told her I wanted to see every document related to the trust. I told her I had already spoken with the law firm and that they needed authorization from all beneficiaries before releasing the full records. There was a long silence. You are really going to do this, she said finally. It was not a question. I just want to understand what happened, I answered. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. My aunt got on the phone then. Her tone was different, sharper around the edges, even though she tried to keep it gentle. Olivia, you have always been dramatic about these things. We handled everything the way your grandmother would have wanted. You were off building your own life. We did not think you cared about the details. I felt the old guilt rise, fast and familiar, the same feeling that used to make me apologize for asking for help in the first place. But this time, something underneath it pushed back. I cared enough to take out loans I'm still paying, I said. I cared enough to believe you when you said there was nothing left. The silence after that was heavier. My mother started to cry. My aunt told me I was being unfair. I ended the call before either of them could say the thing I knew was coming next. The thing about how families should not treat each other this way. Megan came over that night with a folder of notes she had made after doing some searching online about trust distributions in our state. She was careful not to push, but she also would not let me minimize what was happening. You keep saying maybe there is a good explanation, she said. What if the explanation is exactly what it looks like? They kept the money and the truth from you for years. I did not answer right away. I stared at the dark water outside the window and tried to imagine what it would feel like to stop waiting for them to admit anything. The thought scared me more than I expected. The next week brought more calls. My mother left voicemails that started with, "I just want to talk," and ended with long pauses where I could hear her breathing. My aunt sent a long text message that read like a carefully worded defense. She explained that the transfers had been necessary to keep the family stable during a difficult period for her shop, and that they had always intended to tell me when the time was right. The time had apparently never been right in the 7 years since I graduated. I forwarded the text to Megan without comment. She replied with a single line. "This is not protection. This is control." Dr. Cole helped me see something else during our second session. He asked me to describe what happened when I had tried to set even small boundaries in the past. I told him about the time I had said I could not come home for a holiday because of work, and how my mother had cried on the phone for an hour about how alone she felt. I told him about the times my aunt had jokingly called me selfish for moving away. He nodded slowly. "It sounds like every time you tried to choose yourself, the response was to make you feel like choosing yourself was the same as hurting them," he said. That sentence landed hard. I carried it with me for days. By the end of that second week, I had drafted a formal request for the complete trust records and sent it to the law firm, copying Megan, so there would be a record. I did not tell my mother or my aunt I was doing it. I simply sent the email and then sat on my couch with my phone in my hands, waiting for the fallout. It came faster than I expected. My mother called at 9 o'clock that night. Her voice was no longer soft. "I received a copy of your request," she said. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" I had practiced what I wanted to say with Dr. Cole. I had written it down and read it out loud to Megan until the words did not shake. But when the moment came, my throat still felt tight. "I am asking for information that has my name on it," I answered. "That is all. You are tearing us apart over money that was never really yours to begin with," my mother said. The words landed like a slap I had not seen coming. "Your aunt and I carried everything after your grandmother got sick. We made the decisions that needed to be made. And now you show up, years later, acting like we stole from you." I could hear my aunt in the background murmuring something I could not make out. "I never said you stole. I managed." I said, "I want to see what happened." My mother's voice broke then, but not in the way that used to make me back down. This time it sounded like anger, barely held in check. "If you loved us, you would drop this," she said. "You would trust that we did what was best." I sat very still after she hung up. The apartment felt too quiet and too loud at the same time. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the glass, watching the lights move along the river. For the first time in my life, I let myself consider what it might mean to stop trying to earn their version of love. The thought did not feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing at the edge of something I was not sure I could survive. Megan texted a few minutes later, as if she somehow knew. "How are you holding up?" I typed and deleted 3 different answers before I sent the truth. "I think I'm done pretending this is normal," she replied almost immediately. "Then we figure out what comes next together." You are not alone in this. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still does. But that night, sitting alone in the dark with the river moving past my window, I understood something I had spent 27 years trying not to see. The people I had trusted most with my story had been rewriting it without me for a very long time. And the only person who could decide whether I kept letting them was me. The records arrived 2 days later in a plain manila envelope forwarded from the law firm. Elena Rivera, the paralegal who had handled my initial call, included a short cover note explaining that she had redacted only the personal information of other parties as required. I sat at my kitchen table with Megan beside me and opened the pages one by one. The numbers were not enormous, but they told a clear story across almost 8 years. Small transfers had moved from the trust into an account connected to my aunt's gift shop during a year when she had mentioned tight times to the whole family. Larger amounts had gone toward what the notes described as family property maintenance during a period when my mother had redone her kitchen and bought a new car. Every time I had asked for help with tuition or a security deposit, the trust ledger showed the balance listed as depleted for ongoing family needs. There was no record of anyone ever telling me the trust existed. Megan did not say "I told you so." She simply reached over and squeezed my hand where my eyes filled again. That evening, I called Dr. Nathan Cole's office and asked if we could move my next appointment up. He made room the following afternoon. In his office, I laid the pages on the low table between us and watched him read them without rushing. When he looked up, his expression was steady. "You have been carrying the story they gave you for a long time," he said. "These pages tell a different one. It is okay to believe the evidence instead of the guilt." I left his office feeling both heavier and lighter. The heaviness was grief for the version of my mother and my aunt I had wanted to keep believing in. The lightness was the beginning of something I had not felt in years, permission to stop arguing with my own memory. My mother called that night. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that started soft and turned sharp halfway through. "Olivia, I know you received those papers. Your aunt is devastated. She thinks you are trying to punish her for taking care of things when you were too busy to be involved. Please call me back so we can talk like adults instead of through lawyers." I played the message twice, then I deleted it. 3 days later, my aunt sent a long text. It was the longest message she had ever written me. She explained again that everything had been done out of love and necessity. She said my grandmother had trusted her judgment. She said I was choosing to see malice, where there had only been difficult decisions. At the end, she wrote, "If you keep pushing this, there may not be much family left for you to come home to." I read it sitting on the floor by my window, while the river moved below. Then I typed a reply I had practiced with Dr. Cole and with Megan until the words felt like my own. I'm not pushing for punishment. I'm asking for honesty. Since that seems to be something we cannot have right now, I need some space. I will not be coming to any more conversations about the trust or about what I owe the family. If you want to talk about anything else, you can call or text. But I will not be discussing this again unless I bring it up first. I hit send before I could second-guess the period at the end. The silence that followed lasted longer than I expected. My mother called once more, late at night, and left a voicemail that was mostly crying, and the words, "After everything we did for you." My aunt did not text again. The group chat the three of us had used for years went quiet. Holidays came and went with only brief, careful messages. I sent cards. They sent nothing back. Megan became the person I spent Thanksgiving with that year, along with two of her friends from work. We cooked a small turkey and watched old movies. It was not the holiday I had grown up with, but it was the first one in a long time where I did not spend the entire day monitoring my own words to avoid setting someone off. Dr. Cole helped me understand that the loneliness I felt was not a sign I had done something wrong. It was the cost of choosing a life where my reality did not have to be negotiated. Some weeks the cost felt too high. I would sit by the river after work and miss the version of family I had carried in my head for so long. Other weeks, the relief was so clear. I could breathe deeper than I had in years. I kept seeing Elena Rivera's name on occasional updates from the law firm as the final small distributions were processed. She was always professional and brief. Once she added a short line at the bottom of an email, "I hope you are taking care of yourself through this." I did not know if she sent that to everyone, but it helped anyway. The first time I felt something close to peace was on an ordinary Tuesday, almost 6 months after the letter arrived. I came home from work, made dinner for one, and sat by the window with a book instead of checking my phone every 10 minutes. My mother had not called in 3 weeks. My aunt had not reached out at all. The quiet felt strange, but it no longer felt like something I had to fix. I still love them. That part has not disappeared. But love without honesty had become something I could no longer afford. Setting the boundary did not make me cold or dramatic. It made me someone who could finally trust her own eyes. Megan still checks in often. Dr. Cole still sees me twice a month. The river outside my window keeps moving. Some days I feel the absence of my mother's voice and my aunt's presence like a missing tooth I keep touching with my tongue. Other days I feel the space I created around myself and recognize it as something I built on purpose. I do not know what the rest of my life with them will look like. I only know that I stopped waiting for them to become the people I needed them to be. I stopped apologizing for noticing when their actions did not match their words. I stopped treating my own peace as something I had to earn by staying silent. That is the story I have to tell. It is not the story I wanted. It is the one I lived. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, I would really like to know what you decided. Would you have walked away too, or kept trying to make them see?